I 29F was the responsible one in my family. Not by choice, but because someone had to be. My parents, dad 55M and mom 53F, always struggled financially. They never seemed to get ahead, always drowning in debt, barely holding on to jobs, and constantly making bad financial decisions. My younger siblings, Luke 24M and Megan 21F, never had to worry about any of it. They got to live normal lives while I spent my childhood playing the role of the third parent. By the time I was 10, I was babysitting Luke and Megan every day after school. While other kids had playdates and extracurricular activities, I was making sure my siblings ate dinner, finished their homework, and got to bed on time. If mom and dad were home, they were usually too exhausted or too distracted to care. The moment I was old enough to get a job, I did. My paychecks never stayed with me for long. They went to groceries, rent, and whatever crisis my parents found themselves in that month. I had one escape plan: college. I worked my ass off in high school, got good grades, and landed a full scholarship to a great university. It was my ticket out. I could finally start living my own life. But when the time came, my parents sat me down with sad, apologetic faces. They couldn't afford to lose me. Who would pay the bills? Who would take care of Luke and Megan? Who would hold everything together? They swore it would only be for a little while, just until they got back on their feet. I gave in. Instead of moving away to chase my dreams, I stayed behind and worked full-time. I told myself it was temporary. A year, maybe 2, and then I'd go to school. That never happened. There was always another problem, another expense, another excuse for why I couldn't leave. I kept working, kept paying, kept sacrificing. Luke and Megan, meanwhile, lived in a completely different reality. They got new clothes, had school trips fully paid for, got to hang out with friends, and never had to worry about money. The same parents who told me there was nothing left for college somehow managed to send Megan on an international trip with her class. Years passed. I went from a part-time cashier to juggling multiple jobs, working late nights and weekends, while my parents barely worked at all. If they had money, they spent it on things they didn't need: takeout, new furniture, a family trip I wasn't even invited to because I was too busy working. Every time I brought it up, they'd remind me that I was the eldest, that family takes care of each other, that I was lucky to have a roof over my head. If I ever hinted at wanting to move out, they acted like I was abandoning them, like I was the worst daughter in the world. The worst part? I believed them. I turned down a promotion because it required travel and the family needed me here. I refused a better job offer in another city because my parents begged me not to leave. I lived paycheck to paycheck, not because I was irresponsible, but because I was covering rent, groceries, and bills while my parents barely contributed. Every time I thought I'd finally saved up enough to move out, something came up: an unexpected expense, a late bill, another excuse. Then, one day, everything changed. I got home from work and found my parents sitting in the living room, waiting for me. They had serious expressions, the kind that made my stomach sink. Dad handed me a piece of paper. It was a breakdown of the household expenses. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "We need you to start paying more." I was already covering almost everything, but now they wanted more. I asked them what they were contributing. Mom sighed dramatically, saying they just weren't making enough, and that it was my responsibility to pick up the slack. I was done. I hesitated before finally saying the words out loud. I'm moving out. Their reaction was immediate. Mom's eyes welled with tears, and Dad's face turned red with anger. I felt the familiar guilt creeping in, but this time I reminded myself why I had to do this. Luke and Megan, who had never paid a single bill in their lives, acted like I was the villain. They said I was being dramatic, that I could afford to stay a little longer, that it wasn't